there's no excuse anymore, right, to not know about your customers when you have so much data at your disposal. Even if you don't have real customers, you can actually create fake ones. I think it's a good thing because companies can actually start putting themselves in their customers' shoes more. And especially with the context, all the companies didn't have any research or it wasn't organized. Now they're being forced in a way to bring everything together, organize it, and make sense of it, which is a good thing if they use it correctly.
Hi, and welcome back to SaaS Half Full, the only show serving B2B SaaS marketers. I'm Lindsay Groper, EVP at Panblast, and I will be both your host and bartender today. I had a great conversation today with Chris Silvestri, who is the founder of Conversion Alchemy. Chris and I are talking about the ways that AI has impacted copy and messaging, and not just how it screwed it all up and there's AI slop, but also how you can leverage AI to actually create more trust and empathy with your customers. I know, not something we talk about too much. So if you care to, grab a drink and join me as I speak with Chris. Hey, Chris, welcome to SaaS Half Full.
Hey, Lindsay, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I know that my team connected with you just a week ago, so I appreciate you getting on with us here just a week after. And where are you based?
I'm in the UK, in the south, Winchester, which not a lot of people know. It was the capital of England in the Middle Ages. So if you look for like Vikings and everything, Winchester is the place to go.
It's only midday for me and I've already learned something new.
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes sense now why our team was not able to get you a cocktail kit to share with me on the show. Did you bring anything at least to share with me to drink today?
I have my good sleepy tea because this is my last thing of the day. So after this, I'm going to start my shutdown routine.
There you go. Well, as our listeners know, I always stick true to the process no matter what time of day, no matter what day of the week it is. So I am cracking open at 12:30 on a Thursday. Is that what today is? Yeah, on a Thursday. It's a Good Boy vodka, which is basically just a non-carbonated vodka, water in a can. So
nice.
Well, cheers. Nice to meet you.
Cheers. Cheers.
Okay, we are going to dive into our topic here in just a bit, which is all things messaging and copy, specifically as it relates to AI, both how it's destroyed it and made it bad, but more importantly, what we're talking about today is how smart brands are able to actually leverage it to create more trust with buyers. So I'm glad that we're going to be talking about more of the positives versus how AI slop is wrecking us all. But before we do that, I want to just real quickly, Chris, give our listeners a little bit of background on you. You are today the founder of Conversion Alchemy. So certainly want to hear what Conversion Alchemy is, why the company exists. And if you could also just give us a quick little path into how you founded this company, that would be great.
Yeah, so Conversion Alchemy is a small consultancy where we help B2B SaaS companies, typically growth stage with product market fit, find their message market fit, which means understanding who they are speaking to, what language they should speak to, and also how to convert them into more loyal customers down the road. And we do that through a mix of positioning messaging strategy, conversion copywriting, user experience design, and the buyer psychology that's behind all of it. How I got to Conversion Alchemy, it's a bit of a winding road. So I started my work life as a software engineer in industrial automation back in Italy, where I'm from. I did that for 10 years. And in retrospect, I learned a lot about putting myself in other people's shoes, about systems thinking, UX. But I kind of got fed up of all of that. And I wanted to play drums with my band. So I decided, why not start looking for how to make money online? And I stumbled on, after a lot of things that I tried, stumbled on copywriting, and I was instantly hooked by the psychology behind it, the decision-making aspect, understanding what makes people tick. And so, yeah, I stuck to it. I studied on the evenings, weekends, until I was able to make it full-time. And through other different journeys, I worked as a UX lead as well at a startup. I then went back to copywriting with the messaging and positioning strategy and founded Conversion Alchemy in 2021.
All right. Wow, both sides of your brain are definitely working on overload, which is unique. Are you still drumming in a band?
I'm not drumming in a band, but I'm playing a couple of shows here and there whenever I can. So yeah, it's more of a logistical thing right now, just because like having a drum set is a bit of a nightmare. But maybe at some point I will have my full-time band as a hobby. We'll see.
Yeah. What type of music? What's the way to your heart?
It's
What type of music?
typically punk rock. I've always been playing stuff like Blink-182, but then we've evolved. I used to have my band in Italy. We used to tour Europe. We did Russia twice. Lots of places, lots of fun moments, and also some metal here and there. I had another post-hardcore band with screams and all that. But yeah, fun stuff.
Awesome. Love that. I have seen both Blink-182 and Metallica live in concert.
Nice.
Neither of them are really on brand for me, but it was like, you go for the good of the team. Other people wanted to go. And so I went and actually got an appreciation and enjoyed them both.
Good. Very good.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that background. I came across something really interesting on LinkedIn 2 days ago, and it was a discussion around the idea of this trust recession that we're in right now and how it is just creating chaos for marketers. What was interesting though is in the comment section, they were answering the question that was posed, which is like, what are the least fakeable things that we can do as marketers now? And there was a lot of going back to basics. I mean, there were things around events, in-person speaking, getting on the phone. Someone even said, like, I purposely put typos in my copy now. So we were individuals, so they know it's human.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, is this what we've come to? Is like the little red underlined squiggle now a signal of trust versus error? And as a copywriter, I'm sure that's crossed your mind.
Yeah.
So just kind of level set for us, sort of where you see us. And from, obviously we both speak to marketers with our audiences. Where does this leave marketers, and sort of what have you been seeing over the last 2 years that also has certainly changed your business?
Yeah, speaking of LinkedIn content, did you see that people started using longer paragraphs now, blocks of paragraphs, just so that they don't look like AI, which is crazy. I mean, the gist of copywriting is make copy easier to read, and now people are going basically backwards. But yeah. Anyway, what I'm actually seeing, like with my clients, what I'm actually trying to do with my clients is going back to the basics, in the sense that first, in order to be in touch with your customers, you actually need to understand your customers. So to me, 70% of my work is typically always research, deep research, and that means understanding the internal perspective of my client's team, product, support, marketing, the founder, having that perspective as much as possible. Then the external side of things, which means understanding prospects and customers and how to create that transformation that needs to happen. And also the market side of things, the competitors. So looking at their website messaging, looking at reviews. So having a crystal clear picture of the landscape, how customers speak, what their motivations are. Only once you have that, then you can start working on your positioning, messaging, and copy, right, for your website. But I think the clearest path to being more authentic, more human in the future, and now and in the future going forward, is going to be having a strong point of view, which basically is the starting point of your messaging strategy. Until you have that, I think maybe you have good value messaging, it's not all features like what typically SaaS company have done. But if you don't have a strong point of view now, it's even harder, I think, to stand out, just because, again, AI can write all about your value, your features, but if you don't have that particular insight into the market or into what customers are doing wrong and how you solve for it, or typical lies that are spread around, customers won't really pay attention. You need to grab them with something unique that only you have been seeing. That's specific reason why you're building what you're doing. So I think point of view and insight is definitely something that company will need to invest more into and understand better.
What I love for people like you and I, and for context for you, I've worked at a PR agency for B2B SaaS and emerging AI brands, and been doing this for 20 years. And so for people like you and I, it's, part of it is just like, Told you. I mean, we've been saying this for so long, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And now it's all of this point of view and having differentiated thought leadership, and two, there's even this move towards unpolished points of view. Is AI has made every point of view so polished and so buttoned up that it just all fades together, and so having this a bit, a little bit of a rougher point of view, but authentic. So this whole like authentic storytelling bit is like all of a sudden new, and it's like, come on, people, we've been talking about it for how long? What are some maybe of the less obvious signs that you've seen that a company's value positioning or point of view is off? There's obvious metrics, like if you have X amount of demos, they're not converting, there's all this traffic, no one's taking the next step. Are there some more like not as obvious signals that something's off?
Well, churn is another one. So they typically see, because, and a lot of that I think stems from the misalignment of expectation between what you message with what comes after, right? The product. So a lot of my customers might stumble on your messaging, maybe done with AI. They see something, then they enter the product as something completely different. And so that's, again, a misalignment that happens. Something else, probably, from sales conversations, you typically see the early signs even. And I really like whenever I work on messaging, even before launching any live messaging, I test it with sales teams, especially if I'm working obviously with a sales-led organization. We might do some MVP messaging through sales collaterals and test that out in the market first to see the responses that we get. And then basically we adjust from those responses to see how much it resonates. And the great thing about that is that, with a website messaging, emails, you get a lot of metrics and numbers, but you don't really get a feel for the resonance, which you only get when you look at those recordings and people talking to other humans, right? So I love to dive into those.
Where do you most often see the disconnect between what SaaS brands are saying and what customers are hearing? Because I've seen a couple of your recent posts that talks about that there's often a big disconnect and misunderstanding there.
Yeah. Whenever I conduct customer interviews, which I typically do after I speak with teams internally, I definitely see different pictures and different vibes that then I need to connect the dots and match. But also when it comes to messaging of a website, for example, the clear telltale sign for me whenever I do an audit is when the homepage value proposition, literally the first thing that it does, it's introducing the company, what it does, what it is, without actually matching motivation that people have when they land on the page, that conversation that they're having in their head, which is how you actually grab them and hook them and move them down the page, right? Rather than throwing everything at them, first join the conversation that they're having, and then you can actually start explaining what you do and who you are, which it doesn't mean that you need to be fluffy or airy-fairy. It just means that you need to use the right job to be done, for example, and then move them down the page or to other specific use case pages on the website.
Right. Next, I would imagine if folks are hitting your website, they already have you in a bucket of what you do.
Yeah.
And they're looking at a bunch of companies A through D that do the same thing. And so they want to know not what you do, but how you do it differently and what problems that you solve. So that makes sense. The other area I wanted to lean into that you talk about a lot is how AI can actually be used to build empathy. So getting away from the efficiency conversation, which we all agree and check the box on, yes, it's more efficient. But unpack this idea for me of how you can use AI to create empathy, because those two things definitely don't go together typically.
Yeah. So the way that I see it, I really started appreciating using AI more as an input machine rather than an output machine, which is what a lot of people use it for. A lot of people just prompt it to produce some kind of output, right? What I like to do is to feed it with the right context, but then use it to kind of improve and augment in a way the input that I have as part of the research that I do. So a big thing that I do is creating synthetic personas, for example, which a lot of companies I'm seeing, they started doing with custom GPTs, for example, like using those commercial models, right? You prompt it and you tell it, okay, you are a CMO of this company or that one. But the problem is that first, a lot of companies don't feed it the right context, or even if they do, in some of those commercial models, they don't really work effectively just because those models are pre-trained, they have their own biases and influences. And so there's always going to be that sycophantic behavior that tends to want to please you, all of those inherent biases that those models have. And so what I started experimenting with, there's a couple of platforms that have popped up that actually do synthetic research as a productized service, which is pretty interesting because they already include different algorithms and systems that prevent those typical biases to influence them. So they're more reliable. So from, I don't know, a 50, 60% accuracy that you would get, you can get to 70, 80%, which I would say it's nothing revolutionary. It doesn't replace any message testing or any real conversations with customers, but still, when you are at the early stages, or if you want to be able to do research or testing regularly, even just getting a directional feedback on your messaging, on your copy or ideas, it's worth a lot because it saves you a lot of time, a lot of hassle and risks later down the line. And so, yeah, there are a couple of those platforms. But again, I would say the main thing is the context, organizing your context in a way that then your personas are more realistic because they're based on real data rather than just using the whole knowledge of the internet that AIs have access to. Which is interesting because I think yesterday or these few couple of days, I saw HubSpot CEO. I don't know if you saw it. They are talking about agentic customer platform. They are basically about to launch their own agentic CRM, basically, which is in 3 layers. The first layer is the context. So constantly collecting data from customers, from internal teams. The second layer is the collaboration, and the third layer is the action, which means agents taking action. And so I think the future is always it's going to be oriented in that direction more and more, which means constantly gathering context, building your synthetic personas or your systems to be able to validate internally and test, and then take some kind of action that's informed by data.
Yeah, it's interesting. All of these new terms are popping up. My last interview was with a founder of HeatSeeker, and they do synthetic personas and market research. I don't know if that's one of the ones that you use or have come across. And then I had a conversation with the company to bring on as a client this week, and they're fitting into this new category, trying to create this new category of context management. So it's no longer just the data management side. It's as you're creating either AI systems or agents, it's how do you put context around all of this data? And for all the different people, they're trying to touch it and use it and need to safeguard it. So it's all of these terms that are starting to bubble up, and the old categories are now no longer going to serve the new problem. So we're going to see the demise of some pretty historical categories, at least for us in the SaaS space, and have these new ones emerge. And so it's like hard to get your head wrapped around all of it. I mean, even in my conversation with the market research and synthetic persona company, it was, that's all Greek to me, right? Who's not living in it, but I have to, start wrapping my head around it.
Yeah.
You mentioned HubSpot, which obviously has massive data sets. Do you work with more of like the emerging SaaS side of the house, companies that clearly don't have much data, don't have data to train on? If so, how does your process work with them, or what suggestions do you have for them?
Yeah. I mostly work with companies that typically either have very sparse research data or have never really done customer research or market research. And so, I mean, if they have customers, obviously we do the whole process. So we try to interview at least 10, 15 customers. If they don't, one thing that I've been doing, for example, lately, yesterday actually, with this other company, we are basically trying to go to market with a new segment of their personas. But the problem is that they don't have a lot of conversations, and it's also hard because these are bigger enterprise clients. And so it's hard to recruit them or do interviews with them. So what we're doing, they have a couple of recordings. So I've been able to watch 2, 3, 4 recordings, I think. I've created assumptions, my ICP sheet and profile based on that, but to augment and kind of fill in the gaps for now to create a kind of an early customer persona. I basically created an interview telling it exactly, okay, what are some questions that we can ask to fill in the gaps in these personas that we have. And then we created mirrors of those personas, 20 profiles, synthetic profiles with this platform called Synthetic Synthetic Users. And then, we basically conducted those interviews with these synthetic personas that are also created from transcripts that we have of those calls. So in theory, what we did, okay, we have this assumption plus the actual voice of customer. And in theory, these personas were able to kind of reconstruct them, but also expand and kind of transform these assumptions through different lenses, different locations, different types of companies, so that we can kind of get a more accurate idea. And we use that literally to refresh our positioning, our messaging, and the copy that we're going to write. So I think it's a pretty good way, at least, to empathize with your customers, and that's why I say use AI to empathize, because at least it forces you to put yourselves in your customer's shoes. Especially now, there's no excuse anymore, right, to not know about your customers when you have so much data at your disposal. Even if you don't have real customers, you can actually create fake ones. I think it's a good thing because companies can actually start putting themselves in their customers' shoes more. And especially with the context, all the companies didn't have any research or it wasn't organized. Now they're being forced in a way to bring everything together, organize it, and make sense of it, which is a good thing if they use it correctly.
Can you distill that use case down for us further, and without mentioning the company name, but like give us an assumption and then the theory and what buyer you created, what persona you created in that outcome?
So it was a nonprofit, so not strictly a SaaS that I'm working with. And they had the partner side of things. They have 3 different types of partners. With these partners, they are still trying to validate their offer, their pricing. And so some of the assumptions were around, for example, around their buying committee. We needed to know, okay, we know that this is the main buyer, but we are not entirely sure about these are the 2 roles. Do they need to come in the decision-making process, or are they not really someone who we need to speak to, right? So we use those synthetic personas to actually flesh out those insights and to understand, okay, do they enter the picture? And we got good insights because we basically got the kind of a pretty good idea of the different layers of when these different characters come into play in the decision-making process, so that we actually know, okay, we need to flesh this persona out a bit more. We need to describe how they collaborate and how they discuss the deal with this other persona. So this, I think, it's a pretty good use case because it doesn't need to be super specific, but at least it gives you good insights into how you can structure your messaging, your copy, maybe what pages to create to speak to these buyers. So I think that's pretty valuable. Even if you are not 100% sure, it's still a pretty good shot when you're just creating your beachhead segment.
Okay, that was a great example. Thank you. It just helps people get their heads around, and especially these synthetic personas. I think the first thought behind it is like, okay, so we're trusting fake people to give us real world answers and solutions. Yeah. But we have to get past that. But I suppose that the synthetic persona is only as good as the data and inputs that you have used to create it. You can't create it out of nothing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you have to have some basis of customer conversations, of real conversations.
Especially in B2B. B2C, you might be able to get around it just because there's a lot more data around. But B2B, yes, I would definitely start always with some kind of real data, whether it's reviews that you find online, whether it's case studies that you scrape from competitors' website, at least something you have to start with. But also another good example of something that happened in that exercise was that from my persona profile, for example, there were a lot of assumptions when we created these other personas that we kind of cloned, and we fed all of the insights into our kind of strategist AI to analyze. It clearly pointed out the assumptions that these personas basically repeated almost verbatim. There were a lot of things that these personas said exactly the same way. But we've realized, okay, if they said the same exact thing, that maybe this is actually just an assumption that we have. It's not something that we can claim, because in reality, a lot of people would have different opinions on this specific fact, right? So that's an example of, okay, maybe let's not trust this thing entirely because it's way too absolute.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, Chris, is there anything that we haven't tackled that you want to make sure that we cover in this conversation today?
No, it's been great. I think lots of good stuff. I really like talking about these innovations, even though a lot of people are kind of skeptical.
Yeah. But this is the way. This is the way forward. And again, I'm personally just having more and more conversations that are all sort of in this sphere. So I think that this is where we're going. Well, Chris, I end every episode the same way, which is I ask my guests if they have a signature or favorite toast to send us out.
Chin chin, I would say. I'm Italian. I can say chin chin.
We've not had a chin chin in 5 years. I had it. So that's what makes it
nice. Chin chin.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Great to talk with you. Thanks again to Chris for joining me on SaaS Half Full. I hope you took a couple things away from that, maybe how you're looking at your homepage copy or thinking about synthetic personas, because now we've had a couple of episodes here in the last month talking about how to leverage those for better customer insights. We always appreciate the listen, and until next time, bottoms up.